why giving money to Africa makes it poor. Now, Africa's seen a lot of developments, I feel like. I'm not gonna lie, like some of the cities, bro, look crazy. But I think, y'all, I feel like for this, even though I think the past colonization and things like that, do y'all know about like the chocolate slavery? I know that shit sounds insane, but there is literally like chocolate slavery. Nestle's involved in it and a bunch of other companies that basically exploit in Africa, bro, for chocolate. It's actually insane. Giving it to corrupt governments make it poor. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Even though, yeah, colonization and even things like that affect it, it's on the governments also too. Like, I'm never the type of person to be like, nah, bro, Africa just got fucked over by all the European countries. They're still doing shit just because of them. Like, no, bro. The governments have a blame. I'm not gonna lie, the funniest clips, bro, is seeing the African leaders, bro.
Corruption is not bad. Corruption is only bad if I'm not involved.
Yes.
Nah, you hear, bro, riding? Yes. You mean yes, bro? No! Corruption is terrible. Most honest politician, bro. In Africa, bro, I feel like the politicians speak like how the US politicians want to. That is 100% true, bro. Like, I know for a fact US politicians be want to say that. Look, I know it looks like I'm getting paid off by these companies. I know it looks bad, but corruption's only bad if I'm not in it. But I'm not gonna lie, what is it? I think like downtown Nigeria, bro, some of the places look fucking insane now. Like, they've definitely recovered. It's not bad at all. This looks pretty good. Look at them, bro. Rich ass niggas. Beautiful sunset, nice roads. South Africa recovered a bit. Yeah, even there, like, what is it called? Cape Town, right? Like, even look at this view. This view was beautiful. I don't know.
Lagos is one of the most expensive cities to live in the
Wait, it's the most expensive city to live in the world? What?
and it's ranked 55th out of 2.
Okay, I didn't know it was like that. Damn. Yeah, but Nigeria is one of the biggest countries too. Like 232 million, bro. Look at their birth rate, bro. And that shit is going up. This is why America's like, fuck, we're losing. Like, you gotta think of it, bro. 4.4, and their economy is already growing insanely. They're getting a lot of growth. People are moving there from like different parts of the world. Japan needs to take notes. And then the crazy thing is nowadays they're like, you know what? We don't even want any immigrants.
The majority of the population in Lagos make $1 a day or SMTH.
Really? A monthly median of approximately whatever this is, 60,000 or about $37, which translates to a daily earning of $2,001.25. God damn. This is significantly below the minimum wage of $70,000 per month, with a substantial portion of workers in the city earning less than $100,000. Holy shit. Wait, how are they surviving then? Who is living in these like tall ass buildings, bro? But yeah, anyways, going back to what I was saying, Nigeria overall, like countries like that are like growing, bro, and it's kind of crazy. Like America, I feel like the notion changed because back then it was like, oh yeah, legal immigrants, we can't get illegal immigrants, but nowadays, bro, niggas just like, fuck it, bro, get out. No, yeah, why have I dead ass got DMs, bro? I got this DM from this one dude, bro, and he was like, yo, get the fuck out of my country. I was dead shocked. I was like, wait, are you serious? I don't think it was a troll account. Like, these people don't realize, dude, let's say America removed, not even counting illegal immigrants. I'm talking about legal immigrants. I guess that's what some of these fucking weirdo dudes want. Country's gonna drop population. Let's say we're at what, like 350 million. It'll probably drop to like 200 something million. Probably less than that because it's damn near like 50-50 now. Hey guys, Tom NFG here. You know, only half of you guys are subscribed and even less of you guys have noties on. I hate to be a burden, but you know, I really appreciate it if you hit that sub button and the little bell next to it. You know, it doesn't take long. I know you can get mixed up in the algorithm and everything. But yeah, also tune into the streams. You know, we have a lot of fun over there. I'm telling you, we have a lot of parties going on over there. Yeah, that's it. Bye. Damn. The country would probably get passed like economically in like a couple decades, bro. All these other countries are just gonna take these people in and then they're gonna grow. Europe and Japan are having an immigration problem. Wait, Japan? I thought Japan was the opposite. No, Japan doesn't want to let people in, which is probably in the future gonna cause their downfall. Like, it's already dropping like crazy, their population. And then Europe is kind of like, Europe actually has more problems with immigration than America. Like, I've heard their shit is like very lax. Like, they let like a lot of people in, and it's become a problem there. Both of these places, like, they need people to come in or they're just gonna fail most likely. Japan's now allowing immigrants due to their population. I heard, yeah, they're allowing some. It's not like gonna be enough to recover them, you know? You know, they have to allow like a mass amount of people in, which in change is probably gonna change a lot of things with their culture. Like, that's just what's gonna come with it. Or they're gonna have to like slowly add people in and then just hope it's fine. Let me see this though.
In the last 50 years, over $1.2 trillion of aid money has been poured into Africa. More than the entire GDP of countries like Spain, Australia, or South Korea. When all of this began, just 11% of Africa lived in poverty. But by the 1990s, after floods of money and global campaigns, that number had actually increased to 66%. And today it stands at 38%, over 3 times higher than when the aid program started. In fact, back in the 1950s, the average Western European was just 5 times richer than the average African. Now the gap has more than doubled to
God damn!
13 times.
13 times!
Today, over half of all Africans still live on less than $5.50 a day, and nearly 600 million people don't have access to electricity. That's not to say
we do also got to keep in mind though about these countries, even though like, yeah, $6 is still f***ing awful. Their food is like 10 cents. Like, I remember when I went there younger, dude. Bro, you can literally get a full meal for like $40. Or not $40, 40 cents. Like, something crazy, bro. Especially the street vendors. You do got to keep that in mind. It's not like $1.35 in America, nigga, you dead. You homeless, you know what I'm saying? They could still, in parts, survive. It's not good, though. It's not like a crazy survival. They're not, like, living economically good.
this is an entirely recent phenomenon. Africa has always been poorer than the rest of the world, at least for the past 300 years. But for decades, the West's answer to this has been simple. The reason they're poor is because they don't have enough money, and to fix that, we simply just need to give them more. So that's exactly what's happened. Since the 1960s, the amount of aid going into Africa has increased by nearly 120 times. It's easy to see why this is such a popular strategy. It's simple. When we think of aid, we imagine schools being built.
Let me go ahead and see how much like the Trump administration sent to Africa. But one academic paper noting Africa received roughly $7 billion annually in the first 3. Okay, that's not bad.
Roads being paved, children being vaccinated. By and large, this is the strategy that transformed Europe and America into the powerhouses they are today. But in Africa, it doesn't seem to work. The obvious answer that many people turn to is colonialism. Europe wrecked the continent, leaving economic systems so bad that the rise of dictators and corruption was inevitable. And while there's no denying that fleets of luxury cars and presidential jets, while around 30...
Like, yes, you can blame colonialism or whatever. Like, bro, why is this thing in a f***ing jet, bro? And look at all them cheering him on. It's kind of sad because, like, they're not really educated. And, like, they literally just think these dudes are doing good for them. Like, they're not doing good for you, bro. It's going to take some real non-corrupt leaders to go in.
Continent lives without clean water certainly doesn't help. There's more to the story. And a growing body of research is showing that the money being given to Africa isn't just being wasted, it's actually making the continent poorer. But the truth is that decades of Western involvement might be the one thing holding Africa back. This is how aid laid the foundation for the biggest humanitarian failure of the modern era. For a time, foreign aid was seen as a kind of magic bullet, a surefire way to lift the continent of Africa out of extreme poverty. And to be fair, by the 1960s, there was a good reason to think this. The one major instant where it had been tried, it had worked remarkably well. After World War II, Europe was left decimated, and all of this came with a massive geopolitical risk. Across Western Europe, communist parties were quickly gaining popularity, and there was a real risk that without a strong economy, Western Europe could turn to communism, or worse, be invaded by the Soviet Union. For the US, this would have been a disaster. So in 1947, the government announced one of the most ambitious economic programs in human history, the Marshall Plan. Between 1948 and 1952, the US pumped over $13 billion into Europe, roughly $160 billion in today's money. The idea was that by providing Europe with large amounts of cash, America could kickstart investment in the economy. And surprisingly, it worked. In the decade after the Marshall Plan, GDP per capita across the region grew by almost 35%. For the Western world, this was a massive success. But for America, it also represented a turning point. It realized that through
aid, this is how America started adding debt. It started just giving money to every country, right?
It could make countries rich, and in doing so, create both new trading partners and long-term allies in the fight against communism. So after the success of the Marshall Plan, the US looked to another continent, Africa. At the time, the continent was still reeling from centuries of colonialism. In 1960, the average income in sub-Saharan Africa was less than $150 a year, and literacy rates were under 30%, with life expectancy hovering around 45 years. Most of the continent lacked paved roads, electricity grids, or functioning governments, but it also had something America wanted: natural resources.
Africa didn't have such corrupt leaders, and like the politicians are actually this stuff, bro. Africa will literally be the richest country. I said country, continent. Africa is the richest continent, bro, and resources and everything. Bro, all the diamonds come from there, bro. All the motherfucking lithium comes from there. Everything literally comes from there, bro. And like, in a way, a lot of Western governments kind of exploit the politicians being fucking corrupt and shit. And then they just like take their shit or whatever for like a cheap price, or like just pay off the politicians. So yeah, Africa could literally be like the strongest continent to ever exist. Like damn near stronger than America too. But it's just, I don't know, up history, colonialism or whatever fucked them up, and then they never had like a stable government. Things are better now, of course, in modern times, but still similar.
The continent held massive reserves.
No snow bunnies though.
Copper, diamonds.
Nah, bro, you just go to South Africa now.
With a rapidly growing population, it was seen as a future economic giant. If America could repeat the success of the Marshall Plan, it could unlock a new economic frontier and build a key ally.
They fight
in the
each other's
process.
civil wars, yeah.
So the money started flowing. In the 1960s, sub-Saharan Africa was receiving $500 million in aid every year. But by the 1990s, that number had increased 40 times to almost 20 billion. Africa quickly became the most aid-dependent region on Earth. And by the 90s, aid money made up over 60% of government budgets in countries like Uganda, Mali, and Burkina Faso. But despite this massive injection of cash, things were actually getting worse. In fact, from 1970 to 2000,
Like, how was this possible?
the average income in Africa declined, despite receiving almost 600 billion over this time period. But rather than changing
Like, that just literally makes no sense to me.
approach, the West doubled down. In 2005, the UN launched the Millennium Development Goals, and the G8 promised to double aid to Africa, with the end of aiming poverty by 2030. This wasn't just a government strategy anymore, it had become a public movement. Campaigns like Comic Relief in the UK, Live Aid, and Band-Aids Feed the World turned Africa into a moral crusade. Ordinary citizens were donating millions, schools held fundraisers, and celebrities sang charity singles, all under the belief that sending money would fix the problem. That all created a powerful narrative, that poverty in Africa wasn't about politics, corruption, or bad governance, it was simply about a lack of money. And if we just gave enough of it, we could solve
Nah, yeah, you can't give monies to help fix, like, corrupt governments and politicians. It's not gonna work.
that problem. By 2010, aid flows to Africa had reached over $50 billion a year, the highest level in history. Yet nearly 2 decades later, those efforts have fallen dramatically short. 400 million Africans still live on less than $2 a day, the highest number in history, and the continent's share of global trade remains below 3%, and many countries now are poorer than when they were in the 1980s. All of that raises the pretty obvious question: why
How do you fix the corruption anyway? The only way to be able to work if these governments came together and kind of help manage their governments, but you know, it wouldn't work. First off, if they did, bro, they just take over the government or exploit it too. That's the thing, because I feel like back then they probably thought, like, let's say the Western countries was like, all right, we're gonna help y'all, like, kind of stabilize your government and shit. In exchange for, yes, they should get something in exchange for it, whether that's like better resource deals, whatever, things like that. Yeah, I think the African leaders just wouldn't trust it. Do it like Burkina Faso. Yeah, like that country's, the leader is leading them to a better path and stuff. But it really just takes like a couple good leaders for real.
the aid managed to kickstart the European economy?
Maybe Gen Z can make a change. It's been like this for a while there. I don't know.
But totally failed to do the same in Africa. Like always, a range of ideas have been proposed, from the continent's geography to its colonial history. But in the last few years, one school of thought has gained particular attention amongst development experts. Their idea is simple. It can all be explained by something economists refer to as institutions. These are the frameworks that govern societies, things like the rule of law, property rights, and democracy. And they might be the single most important factor when it comes to explaining why aid might be making things in Africa worse. When the Marshall Plan began in Western Europe, Europe had the infrastructure of functioning states. Ministries, legal systems, and public institutions, though damaged, had existed for decades. These institutions provided the framework needed to rebuild. They could collect taxes, distribute resources, and enforce laws, all essential functions for a stable and functioning society. But in much of Africa, the picture was very different.
He just shooting a motherfucking Call of Duty gun out the car with like 20 other people in there. Bro, imagine that shit just fling back. Everybody get mowed down. That Toyota truck, we haven't seen it since like 1985, bro.
Most African states had only recently gained
Child soldier?
independence, and governments were either newly formed or inherited from colonial administrations. But in both cases,
Except what, like Ethiopia and I forgot what other country, but yeah. Ethiopia was never calling us, you know what I'm saying? A lot of Ethiopians take pride in that. Back then, dude, they was motherfucking fighting, bro. Italy tried to come in, bro. They fought them with sticks and rocks and beat them. Except by Italy for a few years. It wasn't even a full occupation. It was like partially for like 3 years. It was literally nothing, bro.
the institutions were generally designed for one purpose: to extract wealth. Unlike most Western democracies, states function almost entirely to serve the interests of the ruling elite. Indexes tracking the quality of government institutions have consistently found African countries near the bottom of the list. In 2025, African nations made nearly half of the bottom.
And cause like, bro, think of it. In Western countries, like let's say, whether it be America, whatever, Europe, if the government tries to like become corrupt and have a dictator, especially here, bro, niggas got the Second Amendment. So they know they can't do that, bro. Like, I know people are saying, oh, Trump's a dictator, this and that. Bro, I guarantee y'all, I promise y'all, bro. If Trump was like, I'm staying in the White House, I don't give a fuck if I gotta leave. It's raps, bro. That would be really pushing if he's like, oh no, I'm staying here. Because technically in the Constitution, bro, if a leader is not following it, like, the people can overthrow the government. And the same thing in, like, European countries. They got guns, they got weapons, the people know shit, they have knowledge. Like, over there, in Africa and the countries like this, they don't have, like, the resources for this knowledge. And they don't have the weapons and the money for it. So they can't really do much.
Some 30 countries on the polity.
Didn't bro joke that he would rig the 2028 elections? I don't know. Either way, I don't really care if he says anything about 2028 because, like, he just can't do it. First off, it's not gonna work. Let's say even if Trump ran, like, nobody's gonna vote for him, bro. It's gonna be too controversial. Except, like, maybe he's gonna have like 10%, 20% of his base left. But, like, other than that, like, he's gonna have to still run and win. Not like he could just, like, stay in. He's gonna have to run the election, win, which that's gonna be an easy slam dunk. People are gonna say he's unconstitutional. He's literally running for a third term, which has never happened for any president other than FDR, which they made the amendment after him.
Democracy ranking. It's not hard to imagine why pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into these states goes wrong. Money that was meant to fund roads, schools, hospitals, electrification often goes straight to the hands of the ruling elites.
Yep.
Presidents who fly private jets to international conferences, or government ministers spotted wearing $60,000 Rolex watches during
That's so crazy, bro.
anti-poverty meetings. Estimates suggest that the continent loses around 30 billion every year due to corruption, and 30% of all the aid money it receives. Over the past 50
Like, the way they would have to do it is, like, come together and be like, all right, we're gonna look what you're spending your money on. If we find out you're spending your money at a poverty meeting and you're wearing a $60,000 watch or whatever, then yeah, we're not giving you money anymore. I guarantee in that moment, bro, the leaders are gonna be like, hold up, okay, we will fix these mistakes. Technically, the IMF is doing that. Okay, I don't know what that is, but if they are, that's good. If they are, they're not doing a good enough job. It would be a good idea to track the corruption and make sure they're not doing it.
This could amount to hundreds of billions of dollars being stolen. But the problem isn't just that this money is effectively being wasted, it also actively supports the very institutions that make development so hard. In a normal democracy, governments are funded through taxes, and that creates a two-way relationship between the state and the people. When the people pay taxes, they expect services in return, and if the ruling class fails to provide this, then they run the risk of people demanding a new government. But in aid-dependent countries, this accountability mechanism is broken. Because governments receive their funding from foreign donors, it doesn't really matter what the people of the country think. And so corruption is able to persist with very little domestic resistance. This pretty much sums up the continent's political process for the past 50 years. Take Malawi, for example. At various points in the 2000s and early 2010s, foreign aid made up more than 40% of the national budget, but huge amounts of money was being stolen by government officials, paying for things like luxury cars,
Bro, they got a Lexus, bro. Bro, they still driving like 1985 Toyota trucks. You just see the leader pull up with a 2025 $200,000 Lexus. That is ridiculous.
cars, private
They're
homes,
not hiding
or
at this
even
point?
international shopping trips. You might expect a scandal to spark mass outrage, and after
I mean, yeah, no, they have protests, but guess what? The governments are corrupt. They just pay the military to, like, shoot them and stuff and kill them. It's sad.
the government was siphoning off millions
Yeah,
that
see,
were
look at that. Is that pink? What is this hose they used?
meant to serve the public, but that simply never happened because there was basically no political
I don't know
fallout,
what I just saw.
as the government
That shit look like Pepto-Bismol.
sources. The people most affected by the mismanagement of public funds, the Malawian citizens, had very little power to demand systemic change.
Yeah.
This isn't unique to Malawi. The same dynamic has been occurring across the continent for decades, and it in part explains why the country still has such high levels of corruption. Of course, some level of corruption exists in basically every country, especially during their early development stages. But even under these circumstances, a country can usually still achieve economic development. Small businesses, farmers, and entrepreneurs can drive progress from the ground up, creating jobs and expanding.
Nah, I'm not gonna lie. I was just focusing on bro in the corner. Why didn't nobody go to a shop? I feel kind of bad. Look, focus on him.
Farmers and entrepreneurs can drive progress.
Nobody went to a shop, man.
Creating jobs and expanding access to goods and services without relying heavily on the state. But this is another one of the main problems with aid. It makes ground up work much harder. Because aid makes this route of development far less likely. That's because more often than not, the things being provided by aid organisations are in direct competition with local businesses. Take the textiles industry. By the early 2000s, nearly 80% of the clothing sold in some African nations came from abroad. At first, that might seem like a win-win. Clothes were cheap, and aid organisations feel good about reducing waste in Western countries. But the effect on local African industry was devastating. In Ghana alone, over 80% of domestic textile factories shut down between 1990 and 2010, which meant thousands of jobs.
See, countries like America and other places, they can afford to have like shit come abroad because it makes so much money anyways. Like the economy's already doing good. You can't do that if your country is relying on a service like this, you know?
Disappearing. And with them, so did the knowledge, machinery, and networks needed to sustain a homegrown industry. In fact, in the last 2 decades, Africa's industrial sector has shrunk from 15% of the continent's economy to now just 10%. This isn't a coincidence. Academic research has found that on average, foreign aid hurts industrialization in Africa. Even the World Bank, one of the biggest aid organizations in the world, found that periods of increased aid tend to weaken local manufacturing. But it's not just domestic industries that suffer. The entire structure of the economy can be distorted in ways that make economic growth far less likely. To understand why, it helps to look at how countries actually grow rich. In the last few decades, almost every country that has achieved rapid development has done so through an export-led model. Nations like South Korea, Taiwan, and China have all seen huge amounts of economic growth in the past few decades, and they did this offering low-cost goods that appealed to Western consumers and then selling them on the international markets. Over time, this allowed them to industrialize, build up domestic industries, and eventually move up the value chain. But there is an essential part of the process that people tend to forget: maintaining a weak currency. Doing this makes the country's exports cheaper on the global market and boosting demand from foreign buyers. This increased demand then helps local industries grow, creating jobs and bringing in valuable foreign income, further fueling development. But aid money creates the opposite effect. When money flows into the country, it needs to be converted into the local currency so that governments and aid organizations...
Wait, they give actual money? Am I dumb? I thought they gave like just like stuff. Like I thought they would give like food and materials. Am I tripping? Wait, so when they give the currency to them, does it even matter? If they're giving the money to them for their economy, how is like, let's say, the euro or dollar gonna help them?
...can actually spend it. But doing this pushes up the price of the currency on foreign exchange markets in response to the higher demand. Having a more valuable currency may not sound like a bad thing, but it actually causes a serious problem. A more expensive currency means that for foreigners trying to buy a country's produce, everything suddenly becomes more expensive, so people simply stop buying the produce. For developing economies, this is a total disaster. It means the export-led model that worked so successfully in East Asia becomes impossible to replicate. In Africa today, exports account for about 20% of the average GDP. Less than half of most successful East Asian economies, like Hong Kong, South Korea, or Taiwan. Instead of developing competitive industries and shipping products around the world, aid-dependent countries end up relying on foreign assistance to survive, while their domestic economies remain uncompetitive and underdeveloped. Of course, that's not to say there's no good that aid can do. In theory, it has the potential to fill crucial gaps in development. Things like building roads, schools, and...
Yeah, the government's just, they're not set up good. Like, whenever they get this money, nothing is done with it, and they f***ed over themselves.
...grids, all facilitating domestic economic expansion. But that brings us
with the way
to
they use
final...
aid, they purposely keep Africa poor. Well, I don't think they did that on purpose at first, but it definitely is like what it's become, where if they just give money to them, then yeah, it's gonna keep Africa poor. And also, a lot of these countries do literally just give money, bro, so they can basically have like debt on the country and be like, all right, you still gotta pay us. And if they can't pay it, they just like take their shit.
Potentially most serious issue with foreign aid. It almost never effectively delivers. A 2012 report by the Center for Global Development found that up to 70% of aid projects either failed to meet their targets or had no measurable impact. In some sectors, the waste was staggering. An audit of health aid in Uganda found that nearly 1/3 of donated medical supplies never reached their intended recipients. Lost to
that is crazy. 1/3 of the money?
Theft, mismanagement, or simple logistical failure. In Haiti, after the 2010 earthquake, billions in aid flowed in, yet less than 10% of it reached local institutions. Most was routed through foreign contractors, NGOs, or overhead costs. And more than a decade later, many communities still lack basic sanitation.
Okay, they gotta give it in a better way.
Or permanent housing. To understand why, it's helpful to look at the systems that function effectively. Take a business operating in a competitive market. If it provides a bad product, consumers will simply switch to its competitors, and the firm's revenues drop. And if it doesn't make changes, it may even end up going bankrupt. The point is that people who are providing the product are accountable to the people who end up actually using it. But foreign aid doesn't work that way. If a project fails, the recipients can withhold their taxes or vote for someone else. Because funding comes from foreign governments or donors, there's no mechanism for rewarding success or punishing failure. The result is an enormous lack of incentives to actually do things well. And the story of foreign aid in Africa is not simply one of failure, but of misplaced assumptions. What began as an effort to lift nations out of poverty has created systems of dependence, weakened institutions, and stifled local industries. That doesn't mean that aid has no role to play. In moments of crisis,
Yeah, I think the worst part is it probably can't even be fixed for like a while. It's not going to be fixed for like decades.
like famine, conflict, or natural disasters, it can provide vital short-term relief. But as a long-term development strategy, the evidence is hard to ignore. Aid has not delivered the transformation it's promised. If the goal is to support sustainable growth, then the focus needs to shift toward building strong institutions, supporting local business, and creating systems where governments are accountable to their people, not to foreign donors. Because until that happens,
The thing is, I can't fully put the blame on the countries like that are trying to help, because like they have their own countries to manage too and shit. You feel me? That was a good video, but yeah, they got their own countries to manage too and shit. But clearly, it's not working the way they're doing it. And like, it's beneficial for them if, let's say, the African countries are successful, because that means they can get more business from them. They can probably get better deals from them if they help start up the country, like a lot better deals to help boost their economy. Gen Z will change it. That's what every generation says. I mean, shit, I hope what else we would. Shit, Nepal just got burnt fucking down, bro. They overthrew their fucking government, you feel me? Anyways, yeah, if you're watching on the 2, make sure to join the Discord and watch streams.
Subscribe to Tommy NFG.